And Ms. Grandjean, if we could just wait for just one moment, we're still letting members into the meeting. And Ms. Grandjean, whenever you're ready.
Excellent. Thanks, Kristen. Good afternoon. Well, I guess depending on where you are, maybe good morning. It's great to see all of your faces. My name's Mandy Grandjean. I'm pleased to serve as the Director of Elections and Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Secretary of State Frank LaRose. And I've taken over the role of Chair of the EAC Standards Board in the wake of Chris Piper's departure. Just want to publicly state thank you to Chris for all of his work previously with the EAC and for the state of Virginia, and the election community will certainly miss him in his official role, but I'm excited to step in today and see all of you. Hopefully this is the last time virtually we'll see each other, and we'll be in person here soon, but we have a great agenda lined up for everyone today. A lot of thought has gone into it, and I just wanted to say thank you very much to all of the commissioners and also all of the staff at the EAC who has been excellent to work with, and for all of the very time-consuming effort that they've put into helping this agenda come together and to get me up to speed in the role of chair. So thank you so very much. I'm excited to get started, and I think I will start with recognizing EAC Chairman Thomas Hicks.
Thank you, Ms. Grandjean, for giving me a moment to address the Standards Board annual meeting. I'd like to echo your comments by saying I hope to also see everyone in person very soon. And I would like to thank all the members for their service on this board. Your participation and feedback is incredibly valuable to the EAC. I also like to recognize and express my thanks for your hard work as state and local election officials. Election officials are great public servants who I know you all are in the middle of preparing for your elections in your jurisdictions. As you get ready, please remember that the EAC has new resources at your disposal. These range from toolkits to communicate elections and post-voting processes to guides about accessibility issues, language minorities, and poll worker training. Thank you so much for your service to America's voters. Today's meeting has a full agenda, so I'll turn it back over to Ms. Grandjean and thank her again for her service. And I look forward to hearing from you all during today's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Hicks. Next, I would like to recognize DFO Commissioner Palmer.
Thank you, Chair Grandjean. I'd like to give my sincere welcome to the Standards Board members joining today. It's great to see some new members joining, and hopefully next year we'll all be back in person or our next meeting back in person meetings together. Thank you for your steady stewardship administering elections in your state and the leadership you show in your state. Please know that we deeply appreciate your ongoing efforts as we head into the 2022 election. We admire the professionalism and resolve you show to maintain the integrity of our system and facilitate the right to vote for Americans. So thank you so much for making the election community stronger by participating in the Standards Board. On this 20th anniversary of HAVA, this is an exciting time to be a member of the Standards Board. We have recently adopted VVSG 2.0 and a life cycle policy, adding more structure and predictability to that process, of which you're a major part. And we are prepared to implement the new security, auditability, and transparency standards in this version of the VVSG. That's why I'm so thankful to our team and your advice as we implement these new standards and develop a process to test and certify this next generation of systems. We're also developing a new security standards for electronic poll books that the VVSG subcommittee and board will be able to review and comment on. Today's agenda will cover a lot of topics that we know are important to you all. And I'd like to thank the members and presenters attending today's meeting. You'll hear from our team, the EAC, the VISTLs, which are accredited labs, and a representative from the manufacturers on how we get from standards to audits and accreditation of those labs to actual 2.0 voting equipment designed by the manufacturers, and then have those systems certified by the EAC and ready for procurement by states and localities. It's a lot to talk about and to sort out, but we want to bring this information to you so that you can share it with your state and localities and your legislatures on the importance of these new standards and the timeline for acquisition of this new systems. Your chair, Mandy Grandjean, will also discuss new and exciting possibility of review and certification of voter registration systems in Ohio and how that process might proceed. As we go through the various panels, I encourage you to ask questions and give feedback. Hearing directly from you as state and local election officials is critical to the EAC. Providing feedback on what you need and your thoughts on EAC resources, programs, after the meeting and during the meeting is welcome and makes us better as an agency. I'd like to know the election environment. We all know that the election environment can change very quickly, and we want to be responsive to you and our partners. There's a couple highlights from the agenda I'll mention. I already mentioned the chair's presentation. We're going to hear an update on the EAC e-Pollbook pilot program. Again, your feedback is vital in aiding in that development of that program. As we look at that program beyond, it would be also helpful in the year to come to gain information on state practices regarding ballot delivery, security, and accessibility in that arena, as we sort of develop the standards for ballot delivery and get suggestions from you on how that takes place in a number of your states. There'll be a panel addressing the supply chain challenges, which I know is on election officials' minds, and as the elections approach us. You should have received the latest EA resources on this issue, and of course, we're going to talk about that today. And lastly, you're going to hear about the implementation of the VVSG. Again, I encourage you to share this information with your members, your states and your localities on the availability and the questions that we have on the manufacturers to demonstrate your interest and ensure the prompt development of voting systems tested to those standards. Thank you for your participation on the Standards Board. I look forward to working with you this election cycle. Again, at this point, I'm going to turn it back to the chair. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to the Standards Board.
Thank you, Commissioner Palmer. And no organization would be strong, I'm biased, without a good attorney. So I'm going to turn it over to Acting General Counsel Amanda Joyner for an overview of our membership guidelines. So thank you, Amanda.
Hello, everyone. Good morning and good afternoon. Give me one moment here. I will share my screen. Okay, and okay. So thank you, Chair. Again, my name is Amanda Joyner. I am the Acting General Counsel for the EAC and the Committee Management Officer for our FACA boards. Thank you all for being here today. I am going to give you a brief overview of what it means to be a member of a FACA board, which is the 3 permanent advisory boards that were established by the Help America Vote Act. That includes the Standards Board, Board of Advisors, and the Technical Guidance or Guidelines Development Committee. In 2021, the EAC also established a 4th advisory board, the Local Leadership Council. Each of these boards is subject to FACA, which is the Federal Advisory Committee Act. FACA governs the establishment, operation, and termination of advisory committees and was enacted to ensure advice by advisory committees is objective and accessible to the public. To that end, the Act contains several requirements for the management of these FACA boards, including the naming of a designated federal officer and committee management officer to maintain compliance with the law, various records management requirements and availability requirements, and charter renewal procedures. Each advisory committee has specific duties. The Standards Board objective and duties include advising the EAC through review of the voluntary voting system guidelines and functioning in an advisory capacity to the EAC. The Board of Advisors has similar duties. The Technical Guidelines Development Committee assists the Executive Director of the EAC in developing the voluntary voting system guidelines, also known as the VVSG. And the new Local Leadership Council provides recommendations and feedback to the EAC on a range of topics that the local representatives that make up the council have quite a bit of expertise on. As standards board members, your duties and responsibilities include participating in meetings and on subcommittees, comporting yourself with integrity so as not to trade upon your position as a member of an advisory board for your own personal benefit. And the law also requires that any permissible direct communications with Congress in your official capacity as a board member may be made only through official channels of the EAC. To that end, too, federal law prohibits you from being a federally registered lobbyist. However, these restrictions do not prohibit you from lobbying members of Congress or the state legislatures or urging others to do so on your own time in your personal capacity. If you do embark on that type of activity, please make sure that you make it clear you're not representing the EAC or the EAC advisory board and are not acting in your official capacity as an advisory board member. There are general committee management guidances that we all follow. As I mentioned earlier, agency heads require an appointed designated federal officer who's responsible for management and supervision of the agency committees. Each committee must have a charter filed with the EAC and other federal agencies as required, and these charters must be renewed every 2 years or be terminated under the sunset provisions of the law. Generally speaking, these committee members must all be balanced in terms of point of view represented and the geographical representation. Meetings are required to be open to the public except for the subcommittee meetings, and the locations must accommodate public access and participation. Even in a virtual setting, we are live on YouTube right now, so the members of the public are able to watch this meeting today. The DFO approves all committee and subcommittee meetings and agendas, and the DFO is responsible for posting agendas and minutes to the website and attends all the meetings. Finally, detailed minutes of each committee meeting, including those that are closed, will be kept and must contain certain criteria, including the date, time, and location, record of attendees, and descriptions of each matter discussed. As a note, our minutes for these meetings are included on our website and on our event pages. Finally, as a reminder, of course, your designated federal officer is Commissioner Don Palmer. Commissioner Ben Hovland is the DFO for the Board of Advisors. Chairman Hicks is the DFO for the Technical Guidelines Development Committee, and Vice Chairman Christine McCormick is the DFO for the new Local Leadership Council. Here are the applicable laws and regulations in case you want to look them over yourself, but I am also here and happy to answer questions at another time if you do have them on how this relates to your activity here today. Finally, here is my contact information, my phone number and email address. If you should have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me at any time. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Chairman Grandjean.
Thanks, Amanda. Commissioner Palmer is now going to administer the oath of office.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I think that what we do on this, the instructions are, we're going to take the oath. I'm going to ask you to mute yourself so we don't have 100+ people repeating the entire oath, but you will repeat the oath, but just do it under mute. I will give you the opportunity to give you a few seconds before I then go into the full oath. So with that, please raise your hand. If you have your screen, you can go ahead and turn that on. Please raise your hand and repeat after me. I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which I'm about to enter. So help me God. Chair Grandjean, I'm turning this back to you.
Thank you, and congratulations. Everyone has taken the oath. How wonderful. I am now going to recognize our Secretary, Dag Robinson, for taking the role and using the roster.
Thank you, Chair Grandjean. Good morning, everyone. For administrative organization, I'm going to do roll call by state or territory in alphabetical order. I would like the state or territory official to respond first by name and then the respective local official by name as we get through this in a unique fashion. All right, and I'll give time for everyone to unmute so that they can answer. Let's start with the great state of Alabama.
John Merrill, Alabama Secretary of State, roll tide.
Hey, is Judge Tatum?
I don't think Judge Tatum is with us, Darren. I've reached out to him, but he's not responded yet, and I don't see a surrogate in his place.
All right, we'll go with that. Alaska.
Judge Tatum, I'm sorry, Judge Tatum is here.
Oh,
James E. Tatum, Bullock County, Alabama.
Perfect.
He's on the phone line.
All righty. Alaska.
Carol Thompson, Division Operations Manager of Alaska.
Thank you. American Samoa. Arizona.
Janine Petty with Maricopa County.
Thank you, Janine. Arkansas. California.
Good morning, Susan Lapsley, Deputy Secretary of State from California. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Colorado.
Dwight Shellman, Colorado Secretary of State's office.
Renee Loy, Delta County Election Supervisor and Chief Deputy Clerk.
Thank you, Renee. Connecticut. Delaware.
Good afternoon, Anthony Alban, State Election Commissioner for the state of Delaware, present.
Thank you, Anthony.
Ralph Artiglaire, Deputy Director, Kent County Elections, Delaware.
Thank you, Ralph. The District of Columbia.
Monica Evans, Executive Director, DC Board of Elections.
Thank you, Monica.
Hi there, Mike Gill, Board Member, DC Board of Elections.
Florida.
Don't see the
Maria, Director, Division of Elections.
Thank you, Maria.
Paul Lux, Supervisor of Elections for Okaloosa County. Roll Tide.
Georgia.
Nancy Boren, Elections Director, Muskogee County, Georgia.
Guam.
Maria Pangilinan, Guam Election Commission.
Joe Lissette, Guam Election Commission.
Thank you. Hawaii.
Kristen Ueda with State of Hawaii.
Idaho.
Patty Weeks, Nez Perce County Clerk.
Thank you, Patty. Illinois.
Kyle Thomas with the Illinois State Board of Elections.
Charles Holliday, Executive Director, Chicago Board of Elections.
Charles. Indiana.
Brad King, Indiana State Election Division.
Iowa.
Dennis Parrott, Jasper County Auditor and Commissioner of Elections.
Kansas.
Brian Caskey, Director of Elections, Secretary of State.
Jamie Shu, County Clerk, Douglas County, Kansas.
Thank you. Kentucky.
Michael Adams, Kentucky Secretary of State.
Jeff Hancock, Franklin County Clerk, go Cats.
Thank you. Louisiana. Maine.
Julie Flynn, Deputy Secretary of State.
And Kathy Monteo, City Clerk for the City of Lewiston, Maine.
Thank you. Maryland.
Nikki Charlson, Deputy Administrator, State Board of Elections.
Massachusetts.
Michelle Tassinari, Director of the State Elections Division.
Andy Dowd, Town Clerk, Northborough, Massachusetts.
Thank you. Michigan.
Justin Roebuck, Ottawa County Clerk and the local representative.
Thank you, Justin. Minnesota.
David Maeda, Director of Elections, Secretary of State.
Debbie Erickson, Crow Wing County.
Thank you both. Mississippi.
Good evening, everybody. Tamika James Jones, Humphreys County Circuit Clerk, County Register. I'm representing the Mississippi Association of Circuit Clerks.
Thank you. Missouri.
Bettina Dodge, County Clerk, Scotland County, Missouri.
Thank you. Montana.
Dana Corson, Director of Elections, Montana Secretary of State's Office.
Nebraska.
Andrew Buller, Assistant Deputy for Elections, Nebraska Secretary of State.
Brian Cruz, Election Commissioner, Douglas County, Omaha, Nebraska.
Thank you both. Nevada.
Yay, Nevada. Go Vegas Knights. Yay. Hey, I am Barbara Sagaski, and I am the Secretary of State for Nevada.
Thank you, Barbara.
Oh, Barbara Sagaski, Secretary of State for Nevada. I don't know if you heard me or not.
I did. Thank you, Secretary.
Okay, thank you.
New Hampshire.
Patricia Pietzu, Assistant Secretary of State, Elections Director.
Robert Tismelek, Moderator, Town of Newton.
Thank you both. New Jersey.
Robert Giles, State Elections.
Linda Von Essay, Clerk of the Board of Elections, Essex County, New Jersey.
Thank you both. New Mexico.
Mandy V. Hill, New Mexico State Election Director.
New York. North Carolina.
Michael Dickerson, Director of Elections for Mecklenburg County, North Carolina.
Thank you. North Dakota.
Hi, Brian Newby, Director of Elections, Secretary of State's Office, North Dakota.
Deanne Buckhouse, Election Coordinator, Cass County, North Dakota.
Thank you both. Ohio.
Mandy Grandjean, Director of Elections and Deputy Assistant Secretary of State, State of Ohio.
Oklahoma. Oregon.
Deborah Scroggin, Director, Oregon Elections Division.
And I am Dag Robinson, Harney County Clerk. Pennsylvania.
Tanya Fernandez, Erie County, Election Supervisor.
Puerto Rico. Rhode Island.
Rob Rock, Director of Elections for the Secretary of State's Office in Rhode Island.
Kathy Placencia, Administrator of Elections for the City of Providence, State of Rhode Island.
Thank you both. South Carolina.
Howard Knapp, Executive Director, South Carolina State Election Commission.
South Dakota.
Carrie Crum, Clay County Auditor, Local Representative for South Dakota.
Thank you. Tennessee.
Secondra Meadows, State Board of Elections, Tennessee.
Texas.
Keith Ingram, Director of Elections for the Texas Secretary of State's Office.
Utah.
Shelley Jackson, Deputy Director, Lieutenant Governor's Office.
Roseanne Mitchell, Elections Director, Utah County.
Thank you both. Vermont.
Will Senning, Director of Elections for the Vermont Secretary of State's Office. Did you hear that, Darren?
I did. Thank you.
Yep.
I was waiting for a local, possibly.
I don't
Virgin
think
Islands.
she's here.
Okay. Virgin Islands.
Barbara Jackson McIntosh, representing the U.S. Virgin Islands Board of Elections, board member.
Thank you. Caroline, I don't see Caroline. Virginia.
Brenda Cabrera, Director of Elections, Fairfax, Virginia.
Thank you, Brenda. Washington. West Virginia.
Brittany Westfall, Director of Elections, West Virginia Secretary of State.
Brian Wood, County Clerk, Putnam County, West Virginia, Local Representative.
Thank you both. Wisconsin.
Megan Wolf, Wisconsin Elections Commission Administrator.
And Lori Stotler, City Clerk Treasurer for the City of Janesville, Local Representative.
Thank you both. Wyoming.
Kai Schoen, State Election Director, Wyoming Secretary of State's Office.
Jackie Gonzalez, Albany County Clerk.
And thank you both. Madam Chair, it looks like we have a quorum with 69 members present.
Excellent. Thank you, Dag. Dag, correct me if I'm wrong, but did you note the proxies are also present? The proxy is also present.
Yes, those were included. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm now going to ask Kristen to show the agenda on the screen and call a vote to approve this agenda.
Madam Chair, this is John Merrill. Motion to approve is submitted.
This is Brad
Excellent.
King of Indiana, seconded.
Thank you. Are there any objections? It is moved and seconded that this body adopts the agenda before you. And I will now take a voice vote to adopt the agenda. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed, say nay. The ayes have it and the agenda is adopted. Thank you all. I am now going to call for a voice vote on approval for previous meeting minutes. So Kristen, could you please show those on the screen? Thank you so much. These are from June 17th, 2021. I will now entertain a motion to adopt the previous meeting minutes as presented.
Anthony Albert, State of Delaware, motion to approve is presented.
Secondra Meadows, State of Tennessee, second.
Excellent. It is moved and seconded that this body adopts the minutes before you. I will now take a voice vote to adopt the minutes. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. The ayes have it and the minutes are adopted. Thank you all so much. I'm now going to announce the Election Certification Committee and spokesperson. Pursuant to the bylaws, I will now appoint the Election Certification Committee. I am appointing the following: Dag Robinson, Anthony Albans, Brad King, Deborah Scorgan, and Bettina Dodge to the committee. The committee will receive the results of the election from Kim Smith of the EAC. They will review and confirm voting procedures and that those voting procedures were properly implemented and followed. And finally, they will certify the results. I believe that appointment has been made. And I'm now going to move on to a report of the proxy committee. This is a little bit of Robert's rules and bylaws that I was given a crash course on earlier by our general counsel, Amanda Joyner. So I appreciate all of her help. But we will now accept a report from our proxy committee that will has reviewed the appointment of a proxy. And I believe Mandy Vahil of New Mexico is our committee spokesman.
Yes, good afternoon, Madam Chair. On behalf of the proxy committee, we have verified one proxy. So Andrew Buller from Nebraska, proxies his ability to vote for today's standards board meeting to Brian Hughes, who is also from Nebraska.
Thank you so much, Mandy. Without objection, this proxy is accepted. As a reminder, proxy voting is allowed for all business matters. However, the bylaws do not permit proxy voting for executive board elections. I'm now going to recognize Kim Smith, who hails from the great state of Ohio and is our Standards Board Assistant DFO, for information on our election process.
On March 30th, you all should have received an email from me containing election information and the biographies for all of the nominees. There are 2 vacancies to fill on the executive board. Initially, we had 5 nominees. However, 1 has withdrawn. So there will be 4 candidates on the ballot today. It dictates that the executive board can have no more than 5 local representatives, 5 state representatives, or 5 representatives of the same political party affiliation. So based on the current executive board membership, either 1 local and 1 state representative or 2 state representatives can be elected today. The political party affiliation of the elected candidates is not going to be of consequence, as no matter their affiliations, we will not exceed HAVA's limitations. Yesterday, I sent another email with instructions on how to cast your ballot and the password for the ballot. As indicated in that email, we sent the link to the ballot after roll call today. So all members who are present should have received the link a few minutes ago. The link is not yet active. Once I conclude, we will activate the link and you'll have 30 minutes to cast your ballot. We will provide warnings at 15 minutes and 5 minutes remaining via the chat. But please pay attention to the time, as the 30 minutes are likely to expire during one of our presentations. Once voting is closed, we will forward those results to the Election Certification Committee, who will review them and declare the winners. If you did not receive one of the emails that I've described, or you're having any technical difficulties, please leave a message in the chat. EAC staff are monitoring that and they'll be able to assist you. If you do not have access to the chat, you can call or text Cami at 202-740-7244. Again, her number is 202-740-7244, and she'll be able to assist you by phone. So that is it for me. We will go ahead and activate the ballot link now. So it should be up and running here in a few seconds. And again, you have 30 minutes to cast your ballot, and I will pass this back to the chair.
Thank you, Kim. Happy voting to all of you. We are now going to move on to our general EAC update, and I'd love to welcome Mark Robbins, our interim executive director of the EAC.
Thank you, Chair Grandjean. It is a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Chairman or Commissioner Palmer and Chairman Hicks. And I want to do a special shout out to EAC staff, to Kim Smith, to Kristen Muthig, and to Amanda Joyner, who really were the back and the legs of putting this meeting together. It takes an effort, and I appreciate the effort that they've put in. It is good. It is interesting to be back with the EAC. For those who don't know me, I served as general counsel of the EAC from 2010 to 2012, which included 6 months at the end of my service as acting executive director. Had someone told me 3 months ago that I'd be back here addressing all of you, I'd have asked for a sip of whatever cocktail they were drinking at the time. But quite fortuitously and unexpectedly, the commission lost both its executive director and general counsel in short order and in quick succession, neither of which had anything to do with the other. And I got a call from one of the commissioners, and then the second commissioner, and then a third commissioner, and then a fourth commissioner, asking me if I would consider coming back as at least interim executive director. And it was, I considered that a challenge, and I accepted the offer with the understanding that I would not be applying for the job on a full-time basis. I'm here because I believe in the commission. I believe in its mission. I'm here to prove something to myself, really, which is that when I left the commission in 2012, those were the dark days. I started out with 4 commissioners, and it quickly went down to 3, and then down to 2, and then to 1, and then we had no commissioners. And we had an active movement within the states and in Congress to abolish the EAC. Those were truly dark times. And for me to return 10 years later and see where the board is now, and to see the working relationship it has with stakeholders in the states and localities, with stakeholders in Congress and with the general public, it warms my heart. It really does. It's night and day, and it's a pleasure for me to be here to experience the difference. And I've only got a couple of minutes here, and what I would really like to do is address just a couple of the things that evidence to me true progress for the commission. The first is the fact that we're having this meeting at all. One of my last chores as acting executive director and general counsel in 2012 was to issue a memorandum which said that the FACA boards had to stand down because we no longer had DFOs, and because we had no commissioners, there was no way to appoint DFOs. And under the Federal Advisory Committee Act, you can't have a FACA if you don't have a DFO. So I issued the opinion to stand down. That quickly turned me into the Darth Vader of the elections community. It was not a popular decision. And I'm happy to report that the commission, since its the restoration of a quorum, has addressed that kind of situation, and I doubt that it could ever happen again. So regardless of what happens with the board and its staff, the FACA boards should be able to constitute themselves and fulfill their statutory missions. Another big difference is the fact that the president just signed into law the fiscal 22 federal budget. Granted, we're halfway through the fiscal year, but better late than never in these kinds of situations. And the EAC received a $3 million or 19% increase in its operational budget. It's a $20 million appropriations, of which 1.5 million, of course, will go to NIST. One big difference this year, though, is that the NIST money is no longer an automatic transfer. It's an expenditure, which is federal talk. It just means we need to reach an interagency agreement with NIST so that the money can be transferred and we agree on a statement of work. The good news for NIST, however, is that because this is now an expenditure, whatever questions existed early on about working through a continuing resolution, preventing that money from being transferred is now resolved. So if we should find ourselves moving into a continuing resolution sometime in the future, NIST will continue to get paid for work done under the interagency agreement that we reach with them. As I'm putting together and working with the commissioners on our fiscal 22 budget, it is important to be realistic about this. This is the first time in a long time the federal government has been operating on an enacted appropriations budget. But I have no doubt that the chance of that moving into fiscal 23 is probably rare, at least until fiscal 23 is well underway. We've got elections coming up, of course, and budgets are difficult even in the easiest of times. So the congressional budget justification that the administration submitted on our behalf a couple of weeks ago calls for another increase in our budget. And there are a couple of issues I'll raise in just a second. But we have to be realistic here. I have to craft a 22 budget that can be sustained through a series of continuing resolutions moving into the new fiscal year, at least until Congress gives us whatever budget they end up agreeing to with regard to the EAC. So working with the commissioners, we've got a number of priorities. We're going to immediately start backfilling open positions that were in existence in 21, but we put on hold during the continuing resolutions. We have built-in monies for expanding staff. The commissioners are interested in making sure our testing and certification process is top-notch and beyond repute. We want to take our website and modernize it because we've got a lot of things that we're pushing now onto the website, including the new portal that's being developed for you all, for state and local elections officials, and just for you, so that you have an ability to communicate and participate in downloading data and programs and what have you. And we've got the new clearinghouse build up that we've been working on for the last year or so. But before I get to clearinghouse, let me touch very quickly on an issue in our fiscal 23 budget proposal. It includes 2 grant programs. And I will say, when I left the EAC, we were still working, and Monica Evans can confirm this, we were still working on the initial 2 grants that totaled about $3.2 billion. And we were getting that out. We were monitoring its expenditures and what have you. Since then, there have been a couple of the Congress has once again begun funding grant money for us. We got $805 million for HAVA election security grants. And that was over 2018 to 2020. And then we received 400 million in CARES Act. That was the coronavirus monies for use in the 2020 election. That period has ended, and we're in the process of closing out and balancing the books on that. And then, as you all may know, we just recently in the 22 budget got 75 million to be distributed pursuant to the formulas. Now, I'm the first to recognize 75 million, once you've divided it up, is not a lot of money. But I've got to tell you, it's a lot better than those days when we were getting cut. So I'm pleased to have staff figure out what the current formula is and distribute that money. Now, with the fiscal 23 budget, these two grant programs that have been included, one would be a competitive grant program called Innovation Grants, and the budget proposal calls for 250 million. And then there is a $10 billion grant program to be expended over 10 years, which is to address federal funding shortfalls and a lack of a steady stream in helping you all do your jobs to meet federal elections issues. This would be a formula grant, and it technically, both grants would technically be available to states and localities. Now, this became an issue of discussion with our colleagues in the Office of Management and Budget and the White House, because the EAC's relationship is through whatever the state apparatus is. We've never dealt, at least on a money front, with localities. So, you know, the administration clearly wants to get money pushed down as far to the grassroots as possible. But the compromise we came up with was that localities, especially for the competitive grants, the innovation grants, can apply if state law allows them. Now, having said all of that, these programs are still on the drafting board. We don't have parameters around them. We don't know exactly how we would implement this. There's going to be a lot of thinking going into this. What does innovation mean? Do we want to take 10 billion if Congress ever deemed it appropriate to appropriate that kind of money up front? Do we want there to be a consistency across the states, or do we literally just plug holes where holes are identified? We would need to issue guidance to make sure that we're following the Administrative Procedures Act and getting this money out. While I'm skeptical that we will get both of these programs enacted as proposed, at least initially, what I do take from it is a vote of confidence from the administration and from the committees that are dealing with this, that if we find this appropriate, if we want to appropriate this kind of money, we do see the EAC as being competent to distribute it and monitor the progress. So again, that's a big change from where we were 10 years ago. Finally, as you all know, the three functions that the big functions that HAVA anticipates EAC working on are the testing and certification of systems, voting systems, the grants, distributing, monitoring, and auditing grants, and then best practices, the clearinghouse function. And because clearinghouse is the one that doesn't have legal definitions and legal deadlines and procedures and processes around it, it's always been the sort of the orphan in the room when it comes to funding and staffing. And I will tell you that has changed. We now have a clearinghouse staffed by subject matter experts, most of whom come from the local or state management of elections. They are doing top rate work. And if you haven't checked it out, I know that, for instance, the DFOs have been pushing out some of the most recent work product dealing with election security issues and the supply chain problems that most of us can anticipate in the next few months leading up to the primaries and general election. This is good work product, but to get this work product out, this goes back to one of the priorities for fiscal 22, which is to update our webpage. Our webpage has an awful lot of information on it, but I'll be the first to admit it isn't very well organized. And I can actually take credit for that because I helped stand it up 10 to 12 years ago. It's easier when you're on the EAC webpage, if you want to find something, to just Google the issue and wait for the links to come through Google and then click the one that's on EAC. Frankly, that's unacceptable, and the 4 commissioners have made that very clear to me. So in order to support our clearinghouse function, in order to support the portal that'll be available as a tool to you all very shortly, we've got to update our technical capabilities, and we will be doing that. And with regard to the clearinghouse function, we are always ready, willing, and able to accept recommendations on what we should be prioritizing, what we should be looking into. We clearly are interested in issues that are common across the country, both at the state and local jurisdictions, and something that we, the EAC, can actually do something about. Now, maybe like supply chain, that's simply identifying the problem and proposing potential mitigation strategies to be adopted by the state or the localities. There may not be something that we actually have a statutory ability to put our hands on and correct, so to speak. But if any of you or several of you have ideas and you don't see us addressing them now, let us know. We would be more than happy to consider those proposals, and to the extent we've got the resources, focus on them. Again, I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled to be back. I don't see my job really as initiating fundamental change at the agency. My job right now is to make sure that the commissioners have what they need to do their statutory responsibilities, to make sure those of you who are representing your localities on the FACA boards have what you need, to make sure that my staff has what it needs to do and service all of you, and then to hand off to the new executive director an organization that's running well and can move in a direction that the new executive director and the commissioners deem appropriate within the coming years. So again, thank you, Chairman, thank you, commissioners, and I'll hand it back to the chair.
Thank you so much, Interim Executive Director. We are now going to move into our ePollbook program update, and I'd like to recognize John Panek, Director of Testing and Certification at the EAC, for an update and presentation on the status of the ePollbook pilot program.
Thank you, Ms. Grandjean, and good afternoon, Standards Board members. Give me a second here to share my screen. Okay, so this presentation, I'm just going to give a very brief update on the status of the EAC's efforts on establishing an ePollbook evaluation pilot program. Over the last 8 months, the EAC has been working on developing a pilot program for testing and certification of ePollbook systems. This pilot is going to contour the existing voting system testing and certification program. This leverages a well-understood process we already have established with the voting system testing and cert program, and it allows us to utilize existing expertise via the VISTLs, test labs, and organizational structure to determine the effectiveness of this type of program. The pilot will develop the following key elements: requirements and responsibilities for manufacturer participants in the program, a way for manufacturers to register to formally participate, testing requirements and procedures, reporting and certification artifacts, as well as a quality monitoring program. As with the voting system testing and certification program, participation will be voluntary. So EAC staff did some research on state e-poll book testing programs and found that there's a little bit of a gap in accessibility and security requirements. And so we are currently in the process of drafting a document with requirements for these areas of accessibility and security for e-poll book systems. This is no simple effort. We're taking the time necessary to ensure that the requirements are well thought out. We have reported out on this through FACA board meetings last year and anticipated that we would be done a little bit sooner, but it is taking a little bit longer to complete than we originally expected. But at this point, the security requirements portion of the draft is nearly complete. We are still working on accessibility requirements. Those are in progress. We're looking at the VVSG to draw some requirements from there and incorporate them where appropriate and applicable into this draft of requirements. We have shared the draft with NIST, and at this time they are providing feedback. We're going back and forth and discussing some of the final elements of the security requirements right now. Last November, the EAC held a roundtable discussion on considerations for this pilot. A video of this roundtable can be found on our website as well as the EAC YouTube channel. E-poll book manufacturers, voting system test labs, and election officials participated in 3 different panels. We feel it was an excellent discussion and a lot of substantive feedback was provided from each of their perspectives. At this point, our next steps are to complete the draft requirements and to share with stakeholders for feedback. The draft requirements should be ready to share out for external review in about the next month or so. I mentioned it would be brief, so that concludes my presentation on updates for the e-poll book evaluation pilot. And I'll turn it back to you, Ms. Grangey.
Thank you so much for that update. Appreciate it. We are now going to move to a great discussion, a very important discussion for all of us and all of our states and territories is the VVSG 2.0 implementation discussion. I want to thank Rob Rock of New Jersey for volunteering to moderate this exciting discussion. And Rob, I will let you take it away.
Thanks, Mandy. And while I love the state of New Jersey, I am from Rhode Island, although I can understand that you confuse me with Bob Giles.
Oops. Rhode Island, not New Jersey.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. Rob Rock, Director of Elections for the Secretary of State's office in Rhode Island. And we've got a great panel discussion today. It is a short discussion, so it's only about 20 minutes, so I want to get right to it. But we've got some great panelists. We're going to hear from John again from the EAC. We're going to hear from Ed Smith from Smartmatic and also who's part of the Sector Coordinating Council, Tracy Mapps from SLI Compliance, and Wendy Owens and Michael Walker from Pro V&B. Basically, I just have, it'll be 2 questions for each of the panelists to talk a little bit about how they see the VVSG moving forward. But I do want to start by turning it over to John Panic from the EAC, who's going to discuss things from the EAC's end for a couple minutes, and then we'll go to our panelists. There will be hopefully some time at the end for questions. So if you have questions, you can either put them in the chat, you can raise your hand, or we'll open it up at the end so long as there is time. But again, we do have a short amount of time, so I'll start right away, turning it over to John. So John, take it away.
All right, thank you, Rob. First, I'll give a brief background on what's necessary for testing to any new VVSG standard once it's been adopted. The EAC's voting system test labs, or VSTLs, they're both present on this panel, must be accredited to test to the new standard. This is a 2-part audit process. NIST's National Voluntary Lab Accreditation Program, or NAVLAP, audits the labs to their handbook 150-22. And following successful completion of that audit, the EAC then audits the labs for ISO 17025 for competence, impartiality, and consistency of operations for testing and calibration services. Last year, the EAC worked with NAVLAP on updates to their handbook 150-22 for voting system testing to include VVSG 2.0. And that was published last October. Also, the EAC testing and certification staff are currently certified lead assessors for ISO 17025. So with that, both the EAC and NAVLAP are prepared to accredit the labs at this time. The next steps at this point are for the labs to apply for their accreditation. It's important to note that when to do so is a business decision for each lab to make. However, once they apply, each audit takes a few weeks to complete from the date they are scheduled. That's assuming there's no critical non-conformances that need to be addressed. And the answer to the question on when VVSG 2.0 equipment will be certified depends on several variables. Once the labs are accredited and testing to the new standard is actually possible, manufacturers then need to submit systems for certification testing. We've heard some comparisons made to VVSG 1.0 regarding how long test campaigns will take for full systems to VVSG 2.0. While it is the precedent, those comparisons are a little bit unfair as it was a brand new program at the time and things needed to be worked out from the program and, you know, with the parties working together and everything was new at that time. So with that, we feel that it'll take significantly less time for 2.0 because the program is mature. The labs are very experienced working with the EAC and with the manufacturers, and the manufacturers have had time to understand VVSG 2.0 and what is necessary to design new hardware and software. So the time frame from submission to certification could be 8 months to over a year, depending on how prepared the manufacturers are and the number of issues encountered during test campaigns that need to be resolved. Rob, back to you.
Thanks, Sean. That was great. Thanks for the update there. Now we're going to turn it over to the three panelists. John's part of the panel too, but we're going to talk to Ed Smith, who's one of the manufacturers, Tracy Maps, and then Wendy Owens and Michael Walker from the Vistal, so that they can give a little bit, from their end. Ultimately, what I think the body is looking for as we look forward to procuring new equipment and working with our legislatures and appropriators, how we see things going for the next few years. So basically, if each of you could answer the two questions, what are your next steps regarding the implementation of VVSG 2.0? And then what is the estimated timeline that a system could be realistically certified? So those are the two questions I think all of us are anticipating or eager to hear the answers to, or at least your sense of it. So we'll start with Ed Smith from Smartmatic. Ed, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Perfect. Thanks.
Thank you, Rob, and my thanks to the commissioners and the standards board today for the opportunity to speak. So I'm actually going to meld the two questions together and come up with answers as I speak and thread my comments. So first off, this question's come up before. It came up in the National Association of Secretaries of State Conference last summer, and Sam Durheimer at Hart spoke and told the group there that they can expect to see systems, multiple systems, pass through certification, not before the presidential, but after the November 2024 presidential. And this is because of a number of factors. One, as John Panic mentioned, the labs have not yet been accredited. Secondly, there is a significant lift between VVSG 1.0 and 1.1 to VVSG 2.0, and every individual manufacturer is developing their system to their timeline and will submit ultimately as their system readiness dictates. And so there will be a time frame after that. Unlike Mr. Panic, I have a little less optimism around the program and its speed. It is a new VVSG. We will find, although there was an incredible amount of work done by all parties to sift through VVSG for any gaps and issues that will emerge. Sometimes only when you actually bring a system in and the rubber meets the road do you find situations where VVSG is not clear. The test cases that the labs develop to test against are not sufficient in some way, or there's ambiguity which needs to be resolved. Also, the requirements for instance, to pass through test readiness review, the very, very first stage of testing, have been increased. And so I know I've told my management, as have other of my colleagues in certification at other manufacturers, that this is a 12-month plus process, and not, I'm not optimistic that it would take less than a year. That's really what I have to say. So in short, a multitude of systems available, but after the next presidential, once again, the labs need to take on accreditation. We need to have the rest of the EAC processes and clarifications of VVSG where those are open, taken care of, and then of course, finish system development and submit. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks for those comments. Next, we're going to turn it over to Tracy Maps from SLI Compliance. Tracy, are you with us?
I'm so sorry. Thank you, Rob. There had to have been someone that leaves their phone on mute first, right? Sorry about that. To answer your first question, next steps. Right now, SLI Compliance is wrapping up our updates to our internal processes and procedures in preparation for testing to the VVSG 2.0. We are planning for our audit with NavLab and also for the EAC. And we anticipate being ready in time for the manufacturers to bring in their systems for certification. As far as the question about how long it takes for a voting system to be tested to the VVSG 2.0, it's a hard question. I think that I would like to be a little bit more optimistic than Ed. Maybe aligned a bit more with John Panic in regards to the 8 months to over 12 months, but I'm hoping that we can get a voting system through much quicker. I do think that we have to all assume that there's going to be some RFIs, requests for interpretation, with the rollout of the VVSG 2.0, very similar to the rollout of 1.0, but hopefully with the test insertions in place, it'll help to minimize these RFIs. I think that, like Ed said, and like John said, based on a system's production readiness and the number of discrepancies that a system has, it's going to help to move a system through the process much quicker. I think that that's all I really have to say right now.
Thank you. Thanks, Tracy. Next up, we're going to hear from Wendy Owens and/or Michael Walker from Pro V&V.
Yes, hello. This is Michael Walker with Pro V&V. As for our current placement right now, we are working on updating our internal documentations, getting ready for the audits for the 2.0. We currently have our NavLab audit scheduled for later this year. And part of the manual is you have to have that recommendation to go. So we'll be applying to the EAC to follow that up. So our hopes is to have the accreditation done by the end of 2022. Let's see, the timeline for certifying a system. I agree with everybody. It's kind of an unknown based on RFIs, readiness of the system. I would like to be optimistic if somebody comes in, ready. And I would guesstimate 9 months, possibly up to the year, but I think it could be on the shorter side. That will improve as time goes along. The initial systems, of course, will take the longest, especially with RFIs, should there be any. But I do believe that will improve as the system, the 2.0 requirements are tested and it matures along as it has with 1.0, as we've seen that decrease over time for a system to get through. And that's pretty much where we are at this point.
All right, thanks. Thanks, Michael, for that. We do have a few minutes. If anyone has any questions, you can either put it in the chat, raise your hand, or just unmute yourself and ask. I think we've got time for a few questions, Chairwoman. So if anyone has anything to add or any questions, we'll leave a minute open for anyone to speak up. All right, I don't see anything in the chat. I don't see any hands, and unless someone forgot to unmute, I think we're good on the questions. I want to thank John and Ed and Tracy and Michael for giving us that update. We appreciate it. We know there's a lot of unknowns, but I think it is helpful as we move on over the next few months on voting equipment and how it's going to look. So we appreciate it, and I will turn it back over to you, Chairwoman, for the next panel or the next event.
Thank you, Rob from Rhode Island. We are now going to take a 5-minute break, and we will reconvene here shortly. So we have a 5-minute break. Enjoy it, and we'll see you here soon. All right, I'm going to give it another minute warning for those to wrap up their 5-minute break. We'll keep moving along. All right, it is 2:56 and we are going to resume our meeting. So next up, I am going to recognize the subcommittee chairs for a brief update on all of the work that they've been doing over the past several months in their various subcommittee subject matters. So Rob Rock, we are going to start with you as the chair of the VVSG subcommittee.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Rob Rock, Director of Elections for the Secretary of State's Office in Rhode Island, and also the chair of the VVSG subcommittee. The subcommittee is made up of six election officials: Mandy Bahil from New Mexico, Ryan Wood from West Virginia, Janine Petty from Arizona, Ken Mata from Arizona, and Debbie Erickson from Minnesota. And we've met 3 times over the last few months. And our first order of business was to develop a charter, which we did, and we adopted it as a subcommittee to give us some guidance moving forward throughout the year. We have had pretty good discussions about 3 different topics, mainly the e-pollbook pilot program, which John spoke about a little bit ago, the VVSG life cycle policy, and then also most recently we brought up the electronic transmission of mail ballots as well as something that we're going to discuss over the course of the year. We have 6 members, but if there's anyone that's interested in joining, we'd love to have as much input as possible. Our next meeting is April 28th. Although I think that our next business is going to be to work with the EAC's draft of the requirements from the e-pollbook for the e-pollbook pilot and kind of work from there. We have a real good group of people that are interested. So there have been good conversations so far, and we're just going to continue to move. And we hope to have something out by the end of the year, kind of an informal update or some suggestions and requirements and things of that sort for the full body, so that we can assist the EAC in these endeavors. It's really important that we as election officials have a seat at the table, and we're grateful for the opportunity to discuss these items. So again, if anyone's interested in joining the group, we're happy to have you. You can either email me directly or through the EAC. But I'm grateful for the 5 other members of the committee. We've had really good discussions. And so if anyone is interested in either e-pollbook pilot certification, the VVSG life cycle policy, or the electronic transmission of mail ballots, we'd love to have you. So that's the quick update from the VVSG committee, and I'll turn it back to you, Mandy.
Thank you, Rob. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Andy Dowd, chair of the Grants and Resources Subcommittee.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. It's tough going after Rob, but I'll do my best. In the year ahead, our committee is going to strive to promote the availability of the grants and resources that are available to our members. And most importantly, we're hoping to highlight some of the success stories that people have had using available funds. As you know, the EAC awards 2 distinct types of grants: to have operational grants and discretionary grants. The good news on funding, which was covered earlier, not to be repetitive, but the Harvard Election Security Funds received appropriations in 2018, 2020, and 22, which was good news given that the last appropriation prior was back in 2010. So there's quite a long dry spell there. And as was mentioned earlier, the 2018 appropriation was $380 million, 2020 another $425 million of new HAVA funds, and then a much lower appropriation in the current year, 22, of $75 million. But certainly good news to hear earlier regarding the potential of a $10 billion grant that would be administered by the EAC. So we're hoping to just get more information out to the members in and share that. And as I said, share some of the successes people have had around the country and territory. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Andy. Next up, I will recognize myself as the chair of the Standards and Practices Subcommittee. We met and came up with the mission and goal of information sharing and really being able to share really important information and work that states have already done on their own with other states. So you may have seen a survey come across your inboxes. I know we all get a ton of surveys, but shameless plug. If you could please fill out the survey, it takes 2 seconds from Kim Smith that's Kim sent out on my behalf and our subcommittee's behalf to get an understanding of the topics in election administration that you all are most interested in receiving other information or other work that states have already completed. So for example, if a state has an e-poll book certification program already, and that state is willing to provide that information to the EAC in conjunction with their clearinghouse function, other states will be able to access a portal or a tab on their webpage that says Ohio e-poll book certification program and access all of that information very easily in one place. We know that we all have very little resources and very little time. And so we want to make information sharing as efficient as possible and make the sharing of best practices and standards very easy and transparent across the states. So this is really the goal of the Standards and Best Practices Committee, and your input on what you want to see from other states is greatly appreciated so we can move this project forward in conjunction with the clearinghouse function of the EAC so that we can share best practices and information that everyone has already done the work on. So thank you. And that is my update from the committee. Take the survey, please, and thank you. Next, I will recognize Mandy Vahil as the chair of the EAVS subcommittee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mandy Vahil. I am the State Election Director in New Mexico. Have the pleasure of being the chair of the EAVS subcommittee. Our committee is made up of 5 individuals. So we have 3 state members and 2 local members. So just kind of want to highlight them. We have Janine Petty. She is the local member from Arizona. We have Nikki Charleston from Maryland, state official. We also have Michelle Tessaneri from Massachusetts as a state official. And last but definitely not least, Miss Renee Mass from Colorado as a local election official. So our committee has convened. We have had a couple of visits to discuss kind of our goal and mission. What we're looking to accomplish is really to be able to highlight either challenge areas or areas of success in all aspects of the EAVS report. We know that data is incredibly important. Now more than ever, it is being highlighted, across the nation. So it's important that we're getting it right. So we want to be able to give feedback to the EAC on how they can maybe improve that process, whether it be through the timing of that survey, through the training on how to actually complete the survey, or ways that we can try to really be able to express the data in a form that is going to make sense. Every state has very unique, challenges and or ways that this data should or shouldn't be reviewed depending on your state laws. So we've really had some great conversations. You may recall several months ago that you received a survey. So that survey was kind of circulated pretty quickly to standard board members to try to expedite information to the subcommittee. I would like to see about recirculating that. And unfortunately, we didn't get a huge response, but certainly appreciate those of you that did respond. So we'll try to get some more information and get some additional feedback. As I mentioned, our goal is to take that feedback, take our own experience, and really be able to highlight areas to do better in this process. With that being said, be on the lookout for another survey. We'll work with the EAC to get that back out. And, we have individuals on the committee. We lost one, so we would be happy to welcome any members that have interest. I think more is going to be better in this case, but appreciate all of the effort of our current committee, very responsive, willing to kind of communicate and share a lot of information. So I look forward to working with them. For those that might have interest, we are looking at meeting once a month going forward. So anyway, that's our update for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mandy. I will now recognize Dwight Shellman as the chair of the Election Security Subcommittee. Dwight, you are muted, my friends.
The multiple levels of secret mutage on Zoom. I apologize. Thank you, Mandy. Good afternoon or good morning, everyone, wherever you happen to be. It's a pleasure to join you today. And may I just say, I, for one, look forward to the time when we can resume these annual meetings in person, because the thing I most enjoy about being a member of the Standards Board is being able to hang out and network with my colleagues from other states. So hopefully one day that will happen soon. In the meantime, the Executive Board asked that I chair the Election Security Subcommittee. The portfolio of this subcommittee is generally to review and assess the material security protocols generally applicable to the conduct of elections in the United States. When appropriate, identify enhancements to existing protocols that state and local election officials should consider implementing in response to a very dynamic and constantly changing threat environment. Specifically, we want to identify, to the extent we can, best practices and successful strategies to mitigate and actually counter election-related disinformation and misinformation, which is so prevalent in this space at the moment. And then finally, prepare a written report in advance of the Standard Board's 2023 annual meeting, and also recommend to the commissioners additional election security tools and resources that the EAC could or should provide. The current membership of the committee, it currently consists of 6 members. Myself, again, as chair, and as a reminder, I'm with the Colorado Secretary of State's office, so I am a state official here in Colorado. Nikki Charlson, also a state official in Maryland. Kenny Barger from Madison County, Kentucky. Patty Weeks from Nez Perce County, Idaho. Rena Fontana Moore, Cascade County Clerk and Recorder in Montana. And Darren Dag Robinson, the Harney County Clerk in Oregon. That is our current membership. This is a big committee, as all of these subcommittees are, and there's a lot of work to do. So we invite any other Standard Board members who may be interested in joining. You can request to become a member by emailing Kim Smith, or you can email me directly. My email address is dwight.shellman@coloradosos.gov. Unlike the other committees, we have not yet met. I assure you that is my responsibility, not our other committee members. But we do want to schedule an initial meeting during the week of April 24th. And once I receive expressions of interest from other prospective committee members, we will set a day and time that's convenient to all the committee members for that week. And the things we want to address in our initial meeting are, first and foremost, schedule recurring monthly meetings at dates and times convenient to all the members. Draft a subcommittee charter, mission statement, and priorities. That may take us a couple meetings to work through and formalize. And then finally, obviously, any other business that additional members want to bring. So if you're interested in this area of election administration, we invite your participation and look forward to a very productive and busy year ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Dwight. Next up, I'm going to recognize moderator Jamie Shu. Thank you for volunteering to walk us through this next panel discussion on mitigating supply chain issues. I know we're all super interested to hear about this issue, so take it away, panel.
I don't know if we're thrilled about hearing the issue, but we're interested, right? My name is Jamie Shu. For the past 17 years, I've been the county clerk and local election official for Douglas County, Kansas. If you're not familiar with where we are located, we are the home of the 2022 National Basketball Champions from the University of Kansas. So Rock Chalk Jayhawk. The executive committee, we kind of discussed a couple things that we could have a panel on, and many of you may be aware that there are some supply chain issues that are being discussed. So we kind of put together a panel of experts. I'm pleased to have three people. I have Ford Bowers, who's president and CEO at Printing United Alliance, Jim Suver, vice president of business development for Runback Election Services, and Chris Lawson, senior vice president and chief information security officer for election systems and software. So welcome to our panel. Ford, let's start with you. Recently, I've had conversations with our printer that are pretty concerning. And I'm sure your membership is having a lot of conversations about the supply chain issues with paper. Could you kind of walk us through the current situation and the factors that are causing this to happen?
You'd be happy to. Thank you, Jamie, for having me. Yes, it's very, for a lot of printers, this is going to be existential, the particular moment that we're in. This is a confluence of several things that have taken place. You just mentioned supply chain issues. I'm sure everybody's familiar with all of the supply chain issues that have pretty much hit every sector in the economy and produced labor shortages and transportation snafus, rising costs, in fuel and labor, so on and so forth. So it's no less affecting the paper supply. What you might not be aware of, however, is that the supply of paper in North America for the types of papers that you rely on to run elections has been in decline for probably 20 or 30 years. This is because the mills that produce those papers and those materials, they have been closing down over the last 20 or 30 years as they become old and obsolete. No new mills are coming online. And even some of the mills that are still operating are being converted to other types of products. So we already had a tight supply going into the pandemic. The pandemic has made it worse in terms of the ability to deliver those paper products. So that's on the supply side. On the demand side, we've seen shifts in demands that are fairly unprecedented. So, for example, if you consider all of the online ordering that has taken place over the last 2 years, all of that requires boxes and craft paper and packaging. And so this is what the mills are chasing. The mills are saying, well, there's more money there, there's demand there. It's a lot less refining of the paper stock to get it to that state. We make more money off that, so they're converting mills in order to be able to chase that money, which of course makes perfect sense. Then you have the fact that competitive products, books, for example, which use very similar stocks or the same types of stocks that you use in the balloting process and envelope process, book sales jumped 13% last year alone. That's a pretty massive jump for one thing to do over the course of 12 months. And of course, that's also pandemic driven. So what you have is you kind of have this perfect, whirlwind of shifts in demand and shifts in supply exacerbated by the pandemic that are really creating a problem that has led to, I'd say between last year and this year, up to 40% increase in the cost of these stocks and lead times that have went from generally a week to 2 weeks to get stock in, up to 12 weeks or more to get stock in to run a job. We have never seen this before in printing, at least not in anyone's collective memory. So this is a pretty serious crisis for the printers in this country.
Ford, I have a follow-up question for you. Could you tell us, you've probably looked at timeline, how far out, or maybe you don't know, like, is this 2022, 2023, 2024? What's kind of the timeline of this?
Before it resolves itself?
Yes.
I do not believe that this will resolve itself in the next few years. So, because once you convert a mill to something else or close it down, you're not bringing that mill back online or converting it back. So the only thing that would mitigate this, I think, is we might see an increase, but mills are pretty much now running at capacity. I mean, they're running at 97, 98% capacity. There's just no more capacity in North America to produce this stuff. Paper, as you might know, is a worldwide commodity. We used to import a lot from Europe and the Far East. They're keeping all of their paper now. Europe, Finland, all the mills in Finland went on strike for 3 months. I'm not sure if they're back online yet. It's probably going to be a long-term structural issue. So there won't be really more paper capacity for us to tap into. And, unless something happens to shift demand patterns back to pre-pandemic demand patterns, which I also don't see happening. Once people start ordering online, they're going to continue to do so. So I don't see a resolution. I think that this is going to be with us for a while. I think it will ameliorate, but the prices I don't think will drop back down significantly. I think we're looking at least a couple of years, before we see any significant changes. I'm more concerned, of course, with the 2024 election cycle, where the volume for this type of materials that you use would be even perhaps 50% more than in this year. So I think it's still going to be a problem.
Well, thank you. I think that's good for all of us to kind of know this is long-term versus short-term. Jim, you and Chris were co-chairs of a working group of the Election Infrastructure Subsector Coordinating Council that recently released a report on this topic. Could you talk to us a little bit about what are the mitigation efforts that you see that election officials should be thinking about for this upcoming election cycle?
Sure, certainly. Thank you, Jamie. So the biggest mitigation that we can address to this supply chain risk is if you would go back to, or your states continue to communicate this issue and this challenge. And we just need dialogue between your jurisdictions and their respective ballot manufacturers, as well as communication to the envelope and mail houses, the mail fulfillment centers. They need to know, those ballot printers and the mail fulfillment centers, they need to know estimates. Is it a 1-card ballot? Is it a 2-card ballot? What are they expecting for for November? And we are at the threshold. Ford had mentioned our lead time for ordering. Vendors are at the threshold for ordering now for November. We've been working on this challenge, this problem, since the end of last year and the beginning of this year. So our message is just to talk with your jurisdictions in your respective states and make sure they're coordinating and planning and deciding now for their November orders. What we are doing is we are actively and daily involved in procurement that we had not done before. We had not purchased or been active in daily purchasing of paper, but we now have stood up someone dedicated to that on a daily and week in, week out basis to make sure we have enough for November. Thank you.
Yeah, Jim, Ford just mentioned this is a multi-year situation. It's not just this election cycle. So are there other things that you think will change in election administration, both on the vendor side and for us for a couple of years?
I don't think we're going to see a lot of changes in this process, especially just with the demand for paper ballots across the US. And we do see possibly some ease in Q1 of 2023, but to yield back to Ford's point, I don't think this will be fully resolved whatsoever and for some time.
Okay, thank you. Chris, the relationship with vendors and suppliers is really a huge part of election administration, as we all know. As I mentioned, you've worked with the coordinating council to really improve the vendors' relationship with all of us. What are the efforts that vendors are making to kind of reach out to their clients? And what are conversations that you think we should be having with our vendors?
Thanks, Jamie, and good afternoon, everybody. Yes, during the process of the Sector Coordinating Council investigating this issue with our print and envelope partners, we quickly realized that the scope of the problem is not really well understood. The large jurisdictions, election jurisdictions who have mature partnerships with their print suppliers, their paper suppliers, were acting early as usual. But our feedback, the feedback that we've been getting is that many medium-sized jurisdictions, small jurisdictions, people who rely on local printers are not aware of the issue. And so our outreach, when Jim and I and the SEC produced that paper, our outreach first was to the Government Coordinating Council leadership, immediately followed by the NAS and NASED members communicating through their organizations to get the word out that what really needs to happen is that you need to get your paper orders in early. Jim said we're almost at the threshold now for November 2022 ordering. Getting those orders in early, establishing a relationship with a secondary or a backup print partner. ES&S and Runbeck have a network of print partners that we work with. We have heard from many of those partners that they are starting to experience stock problems, not just for ballots and envelopes, but all the paper products that are involved in elections, from paper voter registration cards. Even the I voted stickers are getting tough to find. So our outreach, we've advised our print partners, Runbeck and ES&S and others, to communicate to your customers proactively. For example, to reach out to the customers in the election jurisdictions and say, hey, we haven't heard from you. We need to plan for your paper needs well before you're used to. And ballot proofing is going to be more important than ever because it is harder and harder to obtain stock for reprints if a ballot goes out with an error on it. That affects vote by mail mailings, absentee ballot mailings. So communicating early between small and medium jurisdictions and their print partners, establishing a secondary or backup supplier if that's necessary, and not just for paper election-related consumables, but please think about things like USB thumb drives, the secure thumb drives, and all the election consumables that a jurisdiction might need. Plan early, start communicating now. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. We have some time for questions. As we mentioned, these three panelists have quite a bit of experience and have been thinking about this problem well before we were. So if you want to leave your question in a chat or just unmute yourself and ask a question, there is time for that. Everybody has it figured out? Okay, if there are any questions, thank you to our panelists. You know, we are election administrators and vendors are very resourceful and resilient, and we'll figure this out. We might have to get creative, but we always pull off an election. So we look forward to working with our vendors for the upcoming elections. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Appreciate it. And thanks to all of our panelists. We are now going to move on to a presentation that's near and dear to my heart, which is about voter registration systems and their security and integrity. So I would like to, Kristen, present my PowerPoint. Thank you. And I'm going to run through this, Kristen, really quickly because I know I don't have a lot of time. So as you all may or may not know, Ohio has a certification program in the state of Ohio. But I first want to start with, what does voter registration look like in the state of Ohio? We are one of the very rare states that are bottom up and decentralized. It is really fun and makes things very easy when you are a bottom up decentralized state. That is sarcasm at its finest. We do have a statewide voter registration database, of course, pursuant to HAVA. However, our statewide voter registration database is merely a reflection of what is in the county's voter registration database. We do not have any control over the data in the SWVRD. We simply just publish this voter file and statewide voter registration database. Next slide, please. Our certification program currently is run by the Board of Voting Machine Examiners. And that is a bipartisan board that is made up of 4 election officials, 2 from each political party. So completely bipartisan, people that are interacting with this equipment on a daily basis. They recommend for certification voting systems and equipment, remote ballot marking devices, and electronic poll books. And that is a really nice thing to have at the state level. We go further than the EAC, VVSG, et cetera, and we have that remote ballot marking device and e-poll book addition to our certification. Next slide, please. So I hope that we can all agree that accurate and secure voter registration systems and data are foundational to protecting the integrity of our democratic process and electoral system, right? It is really the foundation and the gateway, more or less, to security for elections. So one of the first things that became apparent, at least to me and our administration upon coming into office in 2019, that voter registration systems were missing from the systems that could, in fact, be certified by the BVME. So we recognized very early on that we wanted to draft legislation to change this, to include voter registration systems under the BVME's review and recommendation for certification. Simultaneously, we wanted to create a testing matrix that included testing for security and data integrity within voter registration systems. Next slide, please. So Senate Bill 14 was introduced in our legislature. And it does essentially just what I said it does. If you are interested in more information, this slide deck, happy to send it your way. It includes a lot of information about what the bill technically does. But what it allows the Board of Voting Machine Examiners to do is examine the voter registration systems themselves pursuant to the matrix. It also, permits or it requires the voter registration systems to go to Vista Labs for independent testing before it comes back to the BVME, which is standard practice in the state of Ohio for voting systems, remote ballot marking devices, and e-poll books. Next slide, please. So this is some more detail about the bill itself. Of course, if a voter registration system is not certified, it cannot be used under the proposal of this bill in the state of Ohio. All Board of Voting Machine Examiner meetings are public, which we think is really important from a transparency perspective. So the public can observe the meeting and the examination of the equipment itself. And the discussion between the board members and the vendors on the requirements of the matrix as the board members themselves walk through those requirements to ensure that they have been met by the vendor itself. There is some grandfathering in provisions in there. We understand, obviously, that voter registration systems, really all election technology is expensive. And there's not especially in a bottom-up decentralized system. There's no metaphorical button that you can press that just makes everything new and redone and consistent. If only that existed. Next slide, please. So the bill itself sets forth an approval and certification submission process for the vendors in pretty clear terms that very much mirrors exactly our current system for voting systems, remote ballot marking devices, and e-poll books. Next slide. So this is more as far as the process and the timeline. So this written report is filed with the Secretary of State within 60 days of the vendor submission to allow the Secretary of State's office and the Board of Voting Machine Examiners to review that information before the meeting. And again, this goes through in more detail that you can read the process of and what the report itself must include. Next slide. Ultimately, the board, just as they currently do for the other voting technology that they certify in the state, they recommend to the Secretary of State whether or not that equipment should be certified for use in the state of Ohio. And then the Secretary will make his determination upon receiving that recommendation for the board. Of course, our office would notify the boards of elections that a new system, at least for voter registration, has been approved for use in the state. Next slide. There is a periodic examination and test and inspection requirement as well. Currently, that's on a 5-year track for other equipment. We're going through that process right now, actually, for our other election technology that's under the purview of the VVME, but we think that's a good thing to continue to stay up to date with technology. And as we all know, in election security, things change a mile a minute. So getting that fresh eye on the technology and making sure that it's all up to date. Next slide. And finally, with the bill, there is a withdrawal of certification. So there's a process that sets forth that, provides, I guess, the vendor itself, some due process for the withdrawal in the event that something goes wrong with the technology or the vendor themselves are not following the law and the guideline and the matrix and the technology is failing in the state of Ohio. So there's a withdrawal process that we can go through. We hope to obviously never have to use that. But it's a good contingency plan to have within the proposal. Next slide. And of course, this is more about really the due process and notification that the vendor would receive. Next slide. Same. Next slide. Next slide. We give a lot of due process and notification for withdrawal. We take that very seriously, as you can see. So I know I gave you a lot of information in a very short period of time. I don't want to bore you. Very passionate about certification, processes at the state level. We think it's really important, and we believe that our system here in Ohio has worked very well. We appreciate all of the vendors' support in our current technology that is within the purview of the BVME currently, but we certainly want to bring voter registration systems under that same umbrella. I think I saw a hand up from Paul, but I don't know if I am making that up or not.
No, I had my hand up, Mandy, and then I saw you said email you questions. I was just going to ask, because on one slide you mentioned grandfathering in existing systems, and then further on you were talking about how they could become decertified if they didn't meet standards. Is there a time frame for the ones being grandfathered in that they're allowed to continue using before it gets certified, or eventually just face decertification and have to buy new systems?
Yeah, so it's the former. Yep. So it's, we want to give the flexibility to transition out from the current system to a certified system, if that makes sense. We don't want to say, oh, you have to do something that currently doesn't exist. So we want to work with the counties because our counties are also, the elections are funded at the local level. So we certainly want to, generally speaking, so we certainly want to make sure that we're being mindful of costs and taxpayer dollars as well. It's always the balance, right? With election technology. But that's a great question. Grandfathering in is always, I know we're having those conversations with VVSG life cycle, and we're having those conversations in Ohio with our state certification program of election equipment and voting systems, because we're making some changes. We've made some changes to our matrix and our security protocols. But it's certainly a yin and a yang to make sure that we're getting everybody where they need to be, but over a period of time.
Thanks.
All right. Please email me any other questions that you may have. We're happy to talk to any state about state certification programs and voter registrations. I'm sad to say this bill is not passed yet. I'm hoping that it will, because I think it's really important from a data integrity perspective as well. Thank you all so much for listening to one of my favorite topics, list maintenance and voter registration. We are now going to move on to the long-awaited results of the executive board election. So I would like to recognize Mr. Dag Robinson, the Special Election Committee spokesperson, to announce the results.
Thank you, Chair Grandjean. The Election Certification Committee met during the break. We have reviewed and certified the results of the Executive Board Committee election. And that being said, I'm pleased to announce the committee certifies that Brian Caskey of Kansas and Janine Petty of Arizona have been duly elected to the Executive Committee. Congratulations and thank you to both of you.
Thank you so much, Dag, and congratulations to Brian and Janine. Welcome aboard. And I would like to recognize Commissioner Palmer to administer the oath of office.
So congratulations. I'm going to swear in the new executive board members. If you could raise your hand and repeat after me. I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same. That I take this obligation freely, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which I'm about to enter. So help me God. Congratulations, folks. Back to you, Chair.
Wonderful. Congratulations again. Well, I guess I'm going to take this as somewhat of success of potentially giving you some time back in your extremely, extremely busy schedules. We are at closing remarks time. So I want to thank you all for your time today, not only for your service to the EAC and the Standards Board, but to each of your states and to the voters of the United States of America. It is certainly a duty that we should never take lightly, ever. I know that we have all gone through a tremendous amount over the last 2 years. Some are still going through it with redistricting. That's really directed at myself. And I hope that all of you have an excellent rest of the year. And we look forward to seeing you in person, hopefully very soon. So thank you all for your service and attendance. And I am going to open it up to any other members at this time who want to give closing thoughts or remarks.
Hi, Mandy. It's Bob Giles from New Jersey.
But you're Rob Rock, I thought. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm not that good looking, so I'll just stick with New Jersey. I just wanted to make an announcement to everyone. I am going to be retiring from the state of New Jersey effective May 1st. I've accepted a position with Dominion Voting Systems as their Vice President of Certification and Compliance, and I'll start May 2nd. So, we will have a replacement for me on the Standards Board. I just want to say it's been great serving with everyone. I still look forward to still working with all of you from a different perspective. But again, thank you for your service, and I've made so many tremendous friends and what I consider family through this board. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Bob. And we are very excited to keep you in the elections industry and know that you will bring a great deal of expertise to Dominion. And we're lucky to work with you in that capacity as well.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any other remarks that they would like to make?
This is Brad King from Indiana. I think I speak for everybody who serves as a member of the Standards Board when I convey the thanks of the membership to the EAC staff, and in particular to the DFO and others who've assisted with this meeting, and likewise to the entire executive board for conducting and planning that goes into this meeting. It's not to be underestimated, and you've done a great job. Thank you.
Hear, hear, Brad. Thank you. And with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting.
So moved. Rob Rock from Rhode Island.
Is there a second?
Second, Keith Ingram of Texas.
It is moved and seconded that this body adjourns the meeting. I will now take a voice vote to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed say nay. The ayes have it. Thank you all so much and best of luck.
Happy Easter, everyone.
Thank you all. Take care.
Happy Easter.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Have a good day.